Today we are reviewing You Feel the First Signs, A Scratchy Throat, a by and related text by Joachim Bartol. And imagine waking up with a fever, a pounding headache and maybe a chest just full of congestion.
Yeah, the classic signs.
Right, and usually, your first instinct is to declare war on whatever bug has just invaded your system. But what if, instead of treating those symptoms as like a foreign attack, you're actually supposed to celebrate them? What if your body is finally just doing some long overdue house cleaning?
Which is a pretty wild thought for most people.
It really is. So we are venturing into a radically unconventional framework regarding health, disease, and nutrition today. And before we really get into the weeds, I want to make our mission here absolutely clear. We are acting entirely as your impartial guides through this specific source material.
Yeah.
We are not endorsing these highly controversial medical or dietary viewpoints.
Yeah.
And, we aren't here to attack them either. Our goal is strictly to map out the terrain of Joachim Bartol's arguments, synthesizing his core ideas so you can understand exactly what he's proposing and the logic he uses to get there.
It really is a complete paradigm shift. What the texts present is a view of human biology and pathology that fundamentally challenges almost everything we accept as mainstream medical consensus.
Yeah.
The goal today is to unpack the physiological rationale the author builds, like the underlying why and how of his arguments, without taking a side on the intensely debated nature of the content itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision and clarity. It's almost like engineering, right?
Right, very mechanical.
Yeah, like you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor points at it and says, there it is. That's the problem. It's incredibly binary, broken or not broken. It's clean, and most importantly, you have an identifiable enemy. You find the bad thing, and you neutralize it.
And that is a very comforting psychological model. We, as humans, we desperately want things to be visible and easily categorized.
Oh, absolutely.
We have leaned entirely into this war metaphor of battling an illness or fighting a cold or conquering a disease. It gives us a sense of agency,
But when you step into the framework Bartol has laid out, that whole x-ray machine just shatters. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is completely inverted. The very foundation of what it means to be sick is challenged right out of the gate.
It really is.
The text starts with a scenario we all know intimately. You feel the first signs. A scratchy throat, maybe a slight fever, that heavy, lethargic feeling in your head. And most of us don't even pause to think about the mechanics of it. We just open the medicine cabinet and swallow a pill, or brew a strong medicinal tea.
Just trying to fix it immediately.
Right. And within a few hours, the symptoms ease up, and we declare that the medicine worked. But Bartol's framework asserts that taking medication or remedies for symptoms doesn't actually work at all. In fact, he argues it violently interrupts a natural, healthy, and absolutely essential bodily process.
To understand why he makes that claim, we have to fundamentally redefine what a disease actually is.
Right.
The author argues that modern medicine's concept of disease is an illusion built on miscategorization.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he states that terms like the flu or a cold or various chronic pain conditions are simply man-made labels. They are linguistic constructs that we have just slapped onto a collection of symptoms. And crucially, those symptoms are not evidence of microscopic enemies hunting us down from the outside.
That is a massive mental hurdle for anyone to clear. If a virus isn't a malicious enemy invading my cells, then what is generating the fever?
Well, according to this framework, symptoms, things like mucus production, fever, joint inflammation, skin eruptions, and pain, they are actually the visible mechanical signs of the body prioritizing a massive internal cleanup.
Oh.
It's a visible indication that the body is finally clearing out accumulated toxins or desperately repairing damaged tissue.
The analogy that comes to mind is like a major home renovation. Say you hire a construction crew to fix the crumbling foundation of your house. For weeks, there's going to be loud drilling, dust everywhere, and half the rooms will be totally inaccessible.
And it's miserable to live through.
It's incredibly annoying. You can't sleep, you're uncomfortable. But the noise isn't an attack on your house. The noise is the literal sound of the house getting fixed.
What's fascinating here is that analogy maps perfectly onto his view of symptoms. The fever is simply the heat of the internal machinery working in overdrive to break down waste.
I see.
The mucus is the physical debris being carried out to the trash. And this reclassification of symptoms directly dismantles the conventional understanding of contagion.
Right, because if a cough and a fever are just your own personal internal cleanup process, you can't catch a cleanup from the guy coughing next to you on the subway.
Exactly.
It defies logic.
The author is highly explicit about this. Contagion, in the way the public is taught to fear it, just isn't real.
Wait, really?
Yeah, you are not under siege by microscopic invaders jumping aggressively from person to person. Instead, he proposes an environmental and lifestyle explanation based on what is historically known as terrain theory.
Let's pause there for a second and actually define that, because it's a huge piece of this puzzle. When you say terrain, what are we actually talking about physically?
Terrain refers to the internal environment of your body. So the state of your cells, your tissue, your bloodstream, and your toxic load. Mainstream medicine operates heavily on germ theory, right? The idea that a specific pathogen enters a healthy body and ruins it.
Right, the bug is the bad guy.
Yeah. Terrain theory, conversely, argues that the pathogen is largely irrelevant if the internal environment is healthy. Think of a fish tank. If the fish in the tank start getting sick, you don't vaccinate the fish. You clean the filthy water. The water is the terrain.
Ah, okay. So in this framework, what actually spreads during a so-called outbreak isn't a bug. What is shared is a toxic load and a stressful environment.
Precisely that. It's a shared poor diet, shared unresolved psychological stress, and shared seasonal conditions. Think about an entire office of people.
Oh man, yeah.
They are all sitting under the same artificial light, eating the same processed catering, breathing the same recycled air, and dealing with the exact same end-of-quarter stress.
The classic corporate grind.
Exactly. Over time, that shared burden pushes their internal terrains to the breaking point. When a whole community crosses that physiological threshold simultaneously, their bodies all decide to initiate that noisy construction work at the exact same time.
So it looks like an invisible germ swept through the building.
Yes, but it was actually a synchronized breaking point of their internal environments.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if these symptoms are just the body diligently and intelligently cleaning itself, we have to ask the obvious question. Why do pills and herbs make us feel so much better?
That's the big question.
We can't deny the experiential reality of this. If you have a blinding, pounding headache and you take an aspirin, the pain genuinely goes away. If it's not fixing anything, how is it stopping the pain?
This is where Bartol introduces a crucial mechanical distinction. He argues that every pharmaceutical drug, every concentrated herb, every tincture, and every so-called natural remedy introduces a highly concentrated foreign chemical load into the bloodstream.
Okay.
And the body treats that foreign chemistry as an urgent, immediate threat.
But wait, even natural remedies, I have to play devil's advocate here on behalf of the listener.
Yeah.
I can understand viewing a synthetic pharmaceutical as a foreign chemical threat, but people think herbal tea is completely harmless.
Sure. Yeah.
It's usually seen as gentle, ancient wisdom supporting the body. How can a simple plant extract be an urgent threat? If I could borrow from our construction crew analogy again, it's like having that crew in your house actively dusting and repairing the walls, but then you throw a smoke bomb into the living room.
That is a perfect way to picture it. And when that smoke bomb goes off, the crew reacts exactly how the body's triage system works. The immediate crisis of the smoke takes absolute precedence.
They stop what they're doing.
They drop their tools, they stop repairing the drywall, they stop sweeping the floor, and they scramble frantically to put out the fire or clear the smoke. The immediate crisis is handled, but the actual long-term structural damage to the house remains completely untouched.
So because the cleanup is paused, the noise stops, the drilling stops.
And the symptoms disappear. To handle this sudden new chemical threat from the remedy, the body must immediately redirect all of its energy. Digestion of the remedy, neutralization of its active compounds by the liver, and elimination of its residues take absolute priority. As a result, the original detoxification and repair work that caused your fever or your headache is abruptly halted.
That creates a powerful, dangerous illusion. We think, I feel better, therefore I am cured.
People constantly mistake the suppression of the symptom for the curing of the underlying disease. But what actually happened is that you forced your body to abandon its most important long-term healing work. The damaged cells that were in the middle of being broken down and expelled are just left sitting there half-finished.
Doing this once is one thing. I mean, we've all taken an aspirin to get through a crucial meeting.
Sure.
But the author highlights the compounding danger of this cycle. By repeatedly interrupting the cleanup process with remedies, we're essentially teaching the body that it isn't allowed to finish its job.
He refers to the cycle as managed suppression. When this interruption becomes a habitual, lifelong response to every single ache, sniffle, and cough, the toxins and cellular damage never leave. They continually accumulate beneath the surface.
So they just sit there.
Yeah, the body receives a consistent biochemical message that finishing the detoxification process is simply not permitted. Therefore, the terrain, that internal fish tank we talked about, becomes progressively more polluted and burdened over time.
It's like a toxic debt that keeps compounding with heavy interest. But it's not just pills and tinctures hitting this pause button. We really need to transition into how our daily diet performs the exact same sabotage.
Yes.
Bartol states that inappropriate foods are not just neutral calories that make you gain weight. He explicitly points the finger at sweets, bread, and plant-based items. He argues they carry a heavy chemical load, and because digestion cannot wait, detoxification is paused to process every single meal.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this comes down to a zero-sum game of bodily resources, specifically the balance between two distinct metabolic states, anabolism and catabolism.
Okay, let's break those down.
So anabolism is the process of building up, handling incoming nutrients, digesting and storing energy. Catabolism is the process of breaking down, clearing away damaged tissue, burning fat, and detoxifying.
Right.
The human body struggles to do both optimally at the exact same time. The author argues that food sitting in your digestive tract is an immediate mechanical and chemical reality that cannot be ignored.
It's got to be dealt with.
It must be broken down, neutralized, absorbed, and excreted. Therefore, anabolism always takes precedence over the deeper, flower, catabolic work of healing.
Think about how many of you listening right now start your day with a massive green smoothie or a bowl of oatmeal, thinking you're doing your body a massive favor. This framework argues you're actually putting your system into a state of chronic defense. I mean, I was completely caught off guard by his aggressive stance on plant-based diet.
Oh, it's very aggressive.
It is a direct head-on challenge to what is widely considered the absolute pinnacle of healthy eating in our culture. He claims that vegans and vegetarians often look fine on the surface and rarely show heavy detox symptoms, precisely because eating multiple times a day delivers extreme amounts of plant defense chemicals.
It helps to remember why plants have defense chemicals in the first place. A plant cannot run away from a predator, it can't fight back with claws.
Right, that's just stuck in the ground.
Its only defense mechanism is chemical warfare. Things like oxalates, phytic acid, and lectins, which are designed to irritate or poison the creatures that eat them. The logic Bartol presents is that the human body stays so incredibly busy processing this constant, daily incoming load of incompatible plant compounds that it never gathers enough uninterrupted time or resources to initiate a deep cleanup.
So the symptoms stay mild, or they just feel a little tired because the body's resources are entirely tied up in a 24/7 war of digestion.
Exactly that. According to this framework, they aren't actually healthier at all. They are just perpetually masking the internal damage. He argues that the individual appears fine until the accumulated hidden damage manifests all at once as a sudden catastrophic failure.
Oh, wow.
He points to the very real phenomenon of prominent plant-based influencers who suffer heart attacks, strokes, or sudden multi-organ collapse at relatively young ages. The debt finally comes due.
And it isn't just vegans caught in this trap. The author brings athletes right into the fold. I mean, if you scroll through fitness social media, you see these incredibly shredded influencers eating 5 to 6 plant-based or highly processed, macro-calculated meals a day.
All the time.
It is very hard for the average person to reconcile this theory of toxic buildup with someone who looks like a Greek god.
But the mechanics remain exactly the same. It all comes back to the concept of the repair window. Intense athletic training adds significant physical wear and tear to the tissue. But constant feeding, keeping the digestive system active by eating 5 or 6 times a day, prevents the repair window from ever fully opening. The body never gets a clean, unfed stretch of time in which to finish its deep detoxification and properly rebuild the tissue that the exercise broke down.
Okay, so if a drug or a concentrated herbal remedy is a fast-acting poison that causes a very sharp, sudden pause in healing, then inappropriate food is a diluted, slow-acting poison delivered with every single meal.
That is the core distinction he makes. The remedy appears to work better because the pause is much sharper and more violent, halting the symptom immediately. But the underlying physiological rule is identical. The internal terrain is being degraded, even if athletic performance or a symptom-free day briefly continues.
So what does this all mean for the human body over a lifespan? I mean, if the cleanup crew is constantly sent home by the food we eat and the pills we take, where does all that toxic garbage actually go?
It has to go somewhere.
It doesn't just magically vanish into the ether. And this brings us to the body's emergency storage systems. Bartol states that as the toxic burden grows from all these unfinished cleanups, the body has to turn to secondary containment. It literally expands fat cells to lock away circulating fat-soluble poisons.
This is a crucial, fascinating reframing of what adipose tissue body fat actually does. In standard fitness models, fat is just surplus energy from eating too many calories.
Right.
In this model, fat cells act as active vital containment sites. Many environmental toxins and inappropriate food residues are lipophilic, meaning they bind to fat rather than water.
Okay, I see.
The body purposefully uses fat to trap these poisons and keep them out of the bloodstream, where they would otherwise circulate and destroy highly sensitive vital organs like the kidneys, the liver, or the brain.
It's literally sweeping dirt under the rug. You keep sweeping the toxins out of the bloodstream and tucking them into the fat cells to keep the house looking clean. But eventually the lump under the rug gets so big you trip over it.
And that lump, in Bartol's grim framework, leads us to tumors. He argues that what mainstream medicine categorizes as cancer is actually a last-ditch, desperate protective response.
That is heavy.
He describes tumors not as rogue, malicious cells trying to kill you, but as encapsulation zones. When the toxic load becomes highly concentrated in a specific area, or the overall terrain is so deeply weakened that normal fat storage fails, the tissue attempts to build a physical wall around material that it cannot safely break down or remove.
It's literally a bunker.
It is the body frantically building a bunker to isolate a toxic overload that it was never given the time to clear out.
And what makes this so impactful is that he shares his own deeply personal experience as proof of this mechanism. In 2018, the author received a severe cancer diagnosis, facing multiple tumors and cascading organ failure.
Yeah.
But he views this not as a random stroke of terrible biological luck, but as a mathematical, mechanical inevitability. It was a result of a massive containment failure after decades of accumulated damage and interrupted healing.
It is vital to recognize how firmly he believes this follows basic physiological laws. If you interrupt the repair cycle often enough, year after year, the unfinished work must go somewhere. The tumor is not an invading enemy. The tumor is the body's final, desperate attempt to save you from a systemic poisoning.
To view a tumor as a protective bunker rather than an invading force is a staggering, terrifying shift in perspective. Now, amidst all of this talk about how dangerous remedies are, the author does outline one rare exception where he believes medication might actually be justified.
Yes, he does concede there is a very narrow, specific situation involving short-term medication. If a person's terrain is already dangerously toxic and profoundly weak from years of abuse, a natural symptom, like a wildly high fever, might push their fragile system past the physical threshold of survival.
So the heat of the cleanup might actually burn the entire house down, purely because the structural integrity of the house is so compromised to begin with.
Exactly. In that very limited scenario, chemical intervention buys you time. You artificially lower the fever to survive the night. However, he remains adamant that the intervention cures absolutely nothing.
Right.
It only lowers the intensity of a natural process, and that extreme weakness didn't just happen by accident. It is the predictable consequence of a lifetime of consuming species-inappropriate food, refined carbohydrates, seed oils, plant defense chemicals, combined with relentless chronic stress.
With this grim reality of containment bunkers and accumulated biological debt laid out on the table, we have to look at the solution. How do we get out of this trap? If everything we are doing is wrong, how do we achieve real, uninterrupted healing?
According to the texts, real recovery requires two non-negotiable steps.
Okay, what are they?
Completely stopping the input of toxins and irritants, and providing raw, highly recognizable materials for cellular repair. And for this author, that means transitioning to a species-appropriate hypercarnivore diet consisting exclusively of nutrients from fatty animal foods.
So, just meat and fat.
He argues that animal fats and proteins are the most highly bioavailable forms of nutrition for the human digestive tract. They require minimal effort to process and contain zero plant defense chemicals.
Zero.
When you end the constant chemical assault from plants and processed food, and you provide proper animal-based nutrition, the body finally has the raw structural materials it needs. It can finally shift its resources to finish the cleanup and rebuilding work without being constantly yanked off course by incoming dietary threats.
But there is a massive, uncomfortable catch to this recovery phase. I mean, during this transition, symptoms may drastically intensify. You might experience a raging fever, heavy mucus production, bizarre skin rashes, or old joint pains flaring up out of nowhere.
And that scares people.
Yeah, but he insists this isn't a failure of the diet, and it doesn't mean the meat is making you sick. It is the backlog being processed.
This is where the framework demands immense, almost unimaginable psychological discipline. When the bodily system finally gets the uninterrupted chance to complete what was postponed for years, the signs of that work become glaringly obvious.
Right, the construction gets really loud.
Exactly. The instruction here is straightforward mechanically, but devastatingly hard in practice. You must rest when the body asks for it, you must eat only when genuinely hungry, and you must absolutely refuse the urge to take a pill to shut the symptoms down when they become uncomfortable.
I really have to pause and reflect on how incredibly difficult that is to ask of a person living in the modern world.
Mm.
I mean, it is asking someone to reject thousands of years of medical tradition and social conditioning.
Oh, absolutely.
The relief felt after swallowing a soothing substance is so immediate and so gratifying. It is a deeply ingrained, almost primal human instinct to soothe pain, silence discomfort, and get back to work.
This raises an important question, though. What does it truly take to completely surrender to the body's native processes? Because the author frames this as a fundamental, unavoidable trade-off.
Okay.
You can buy a few hours or days of short-term comfort by using remedies, but you pay for it by slowly declining into what we incorrectly consider normal aging and chronic disease, driven entirely by an expanding toxic debt.
Or the alternative choice. You rip the Band-Aid off, you remove plant-based and processed foods, you adopt a strict animal-based diet, and you let the body quietly, painfully, and continuously clean itself.
Yeah.
He claims that people who return to this hyper-carnivore diet and push through the healing crisis almost never get sick with the usual seasonal symptoms again. Why? Because the major sources of toxic load have been completely removed, and the body finally have the abundant resources required to handle the smaller, everyday environmental stressors on the fly without needing a massive, noisy renovation.
It is an argument built on radical trust in human biology. The core tenet is that the body is not the enemy. It is the only system on Earth capable of cleaning and rebuilding itself. Every chemical intervention, whether it comes from a pristine pharmacy or a rustic health food store that silences the body's signals, only makes that inevitable job infinitely harder.
It is a framework that asks us to completely redefine our relationship with our own physical discomfort, our understanding of illness, and literally every piece of food we put on our plates.
And it leaves us with a profound final thought to mull over as we close. If our bodies are, in fact, perfectly designed, endlessly patient self-cleaning mechanisms, how much of modern human anxiety and chronic illness stems simply from our sheer inability to sit still and be uncomfortable for a few days? We are so profoundly terrified of the noise of our own healing that we may be continuously, systematically sabotaging the very process that keeps us alive.
Thank you for listening to another session of the GeminoNotebook.art series. You can find the full archive of all my podcasts at GeminoNotebook.art.